presentation, and then we may get a few more people joining during the course of the presentation. Let me just share the screen very quickly. Okay, hopefully you can all see this. So look, I know you all got family and you want to have a bit of rest and relaxation later tonight, so we'll try and stick to time. What I suggest is that let me complete the presentation first, and I'll take about maybe 30 minutes to complete it, and then we'll have some time towards the end for any questions or comments. Now, just we've done the introduction, but just in terms of the purpose of this presentation, is essentially to provide you with an overview. Just getting Amanda coming in as well, is to provide you with an overview of the Hamilton-Waikato Metropolitan Spatial Plan, which has been developed through a joint councils, Crown-Iwi partnership, so Waikato District Council, Hamilton City Council, Waikato District Council, Regional Council have worked together with government agencies as well as with local iwi in terms of developing this plan. This is a draft plan. It's been prepared for consultation early next year through the review of Future Proof. Now, just to give you an idea of the area covered, I'm just going to bring up a map to show you. Can you all see this map?
No.
Not yet.
No, okay, look. Okay, look, I've got a map later on in the presentation, but let me just get you back on screen. Okay, essentially, it covers the area from Taupuri, includes Ngaruawahia, includes Tokowhai, Gordonton, Whatawhata, Hamilton City, extends right down to Tamahiri, Cambridge, Tiamutu, Matangi, Arukura. So it's quite a large area, which is really an area defined by Statistics New Zealand in terms of that Hamilton metropolitan area. So what I'm going to do is, with regards to what we're talking about today, is provide you with a background to the urban growth agenda under which this plan has been developed. Also provide you with an overview as to why we're developing the Metropolitan Spatial Plan, and talk about some of the key opportunities and benefits of the plan, the relevance to your community group, and as well as the next steps. Now, I'm just going to have to ask you, this is not, or tell you that this is not a community plan per se. This is not about your local communities. This is a high-level metropolitan plan. So just imagine you are up on a helicopter, high up above Hamilton, looking at the entire metropolitan area. So if you want something that's relevant to your communities, you have your community plans or the district blueprints that addresses that. This is really taking a big picture view of the entire metropolitan area and looking at how it's going to grow and develop over a 100-year period. So it's quite a long-term period. Right, so just in terms of the urban growth agenda, so this is quite an ambitious government program that really aims to remove barriers to the supply of land and infrastructure, make room for cities to grow upwards and outwards. Now, there are 5 key focus areas of the urban growth agenda. These are infrastructure funding and financing, urban planning, spatial planning, transport pricing, and legislative reform. And spatial planning and urban planning are 2 key components of this particular plan. Now, there are 7 partnerships around the country between Crown, Mana Whenua, and local government. The Hamilton to Auckland corridor is one of the most advanced. This started about 18 months ago. So that has now been formally established. It's been overseen by the Future Proof Implementation Committee. So we have 2 Crown ministers on that committee, as well as the mayors of the respective councils, and chairperson of the regional council, as well as some of the other government agencies are involved as well. And also the Auckland region is also formally established a partnership between Auckland City as well as central government and Mana Whenua. And then there are some partnerships that are in development. These are in Tauranga, Western Bay of Plenty, Wellington, Hora Whenua, as well as Queenstown Lakes, Central Otago, and possible future partnerships in terms of Christchurch, Canterbury, as well as Northland, Auckland corridor. So the structure of the Urban Growth Agenda Joint Spatial Plans is really trying to establish the current context and performance of major growth areas. And this is looking at the existing urban form and quality, some key growth management challenges, as well as opportunities that needs to be addressed, the need for a spatial plan, and we have to also give effect to the National Policy Statement on Urban Development, which is really which came into effect earlier last month. This is really requiring growth areas and especially cities to have short, medium, and long-term targets for residential as well as business capacity provisions with regards to growth. We're also looking at how these areas, these major metropolitan areas, are going to grow and develop, and what the assumed growth scenario is. For the Hamilton-Waikato Metro Spatial Plan, we took a scenario of 500,000 people over the next 100 years. So it's a what-if scenario. It's not to say this is a target, but what if Hamilton Metropolitan or Hamilton-Waikato Metropolitan area grows to 500,000 people over the next 100 years? Where are these people going to be? Where are they going to work? How are they going to travel to work and places of recreation and leisure? So all these things have been thought about in developing this plan, and I'll come back to some of these a bit later. Also, where to grow and develop. So we need to make sure that this growth is not scattered or dispersed. It's focused in key growth areas that are aligned to key transport corridors, as well as we need to take into consideration areas that are prone to hazards such as flooding, or even areas that have peat soils, but also blue-green network areas that need to be protected. So all these need to be considered in terms of where that growth is going to happen. So just moving on to the next slide. So the critical features of the Urban Growth Agenda Spatial Plans is to protect what we value the most, to achieve the required transformational change, to successfully grow well-structured and cost-effective areas. So we need to make sure that in providing for growth, we also are able to service this growth from a three waters perspective: water, wastewater, stormwater, roading perspective, as well as community infrastructure, and it needs to be affordable. We cannot lower the cost of growth and development on communities, because it renders housing unaffordable. So we need to make sure we're smart in terms of where this growth is going to happen. We also need to enable competitive land markets to drive down prices, and to also successfully manage future growth at the required pace and scale. As I mentioned to you before, we've taken a scenario of 500,000 people in the Hamilton metropolitan area over the 100-year period. And this is really taking a boundary-less approach to growth and development in this metropolitan area. So forget about political boundaries, forget about the Hamilton boundary, the Waikato district boundary, the Waikato district boundary. We're just looking at the metropolitan area holistically without political boundaries, and how best can we grow this area and ensure we provide for integrated land use as well as a good transport network. So there are a few facts that have informed the thinking, and I'm not going to go through this in detail, but just highlight a few figures for you. The total area in hectares is about 76,000 hectares. The total population currently is about 213,000. And you will see that we're actually looking at more than doubling this, or planning for more than doubling this over the next 100 years. In terms of some of the growth management performance challenges, you can see the housing affordability scale there of 5.2, which is not very good. Also quite a low percentage of housing choice, 22%. Very low usage of public transport, only 1%. Access to communities in terms of a less than 30-minute travel to work and study is reasonably good, as 70%, but many people use private motor vehicles, as you know. And in terms of our carbon emissions, that's also not up to scratch, so we could do a bit better there, and that's why we need to look at better public transport choices as well. Some of the key challenges. So this area, the Hamilton-Waikato metropolitan area, is the third least affordable housing market in New Zealand. It's the infrastructure is also limiting future land supply capacity, or the lack of infrastructure to support growth. It has the highest private vehicle dependency and poor safety outcomes for cyclists and pedestrians. The economy, the sub-regional economy, is underperforming, and the GDP is lagging in terms of GDP per capita growth. There's also high income disparities and low labor productivity levels. And of course, the Waikato River is significantly degraded, and it's a valued ecological resource, and also an asset, a real asset in the region as well. So what's in it? There are 5 focus areas in the spatial plan. One is developing a lively metropolitan center, well connected to public transport, where people can live, work, and play. Celebrating the Waikato River as a defining feature, as I mentioned previously, and also helping to realize iwi's aspirations for the river. Establishing a multimodal transport network as a core spatial feature and facilitating a radical shift to public transport. Growing Hamilton Central as a most important civic, administrative, and commercial center in the metro, but also at in the Waikato region as well. And establishing an economic corridor that links employment areas between Ruakura, central Hamilton, and to the north, that's Horatu. So that Horatu, Hamilton CBD, Ruakura area is the defining economic corridor in this region. And we'll chat more about this a bit later. Now, in terms of the process we followed, we looked at essentially four scenarios. The first one is a business as usual approach using existing planning tools, which is really looking at your existing district plans, your regional policy statement, and your future-proof document. Then a city-focused growth, making sure that all the growth happens just in Hamilton and nowhere else. A shared growth across nodes, making sure that growth is spread evenly, but in the right locations and with the appropriate provision of infrastructure to support that. And then a more market-led, laissez-faire growth scenario where the market just determines where the growth is going to happen. And clearly there are challenges with that as well. So in the end, we landed on a combination of a shared growth across nodes, but also being more responsive to market forces as well. Oh, sorry, I've just gone right till the end. Let me just quickly go back. So in terms of Waihi Toitu, so this is really about making sure we protect the areas that we value the most and areas we need to avoid with regards to growth. So if you have a look at this map here, so this area here where I'm pointing the cursor is Hamilton Central, and then the entire area around that. That's the metro as a whole, which includes Waipa and Hamilton, Waikato districts as well. This is Ngaruai here and Taupuri up in the north. So as you can see, the grey areas is really the areas which have high quality soils or high flood risk or significant natural areas, heritage sites, reserves, so essentially land that needs to be protected. So this has been a key consideration in the team and also the elected members involved in terms of helping to ensure that we direct growth to the appropriate locations in the metropolitan area. And another key structuring element is the blue-green network. It's really your significant natural areas or lakes, rivers, wetlands, all these, and I think we all acknowledge needs to be protected with regards to how we grow the city. Also looking at the restoration of peat lakes, the catchments, and also areas of peat dome, which will facilitate the establishment of enhanced wetlands ecosystems, and also a network of green space, which will help with people's recreational activities, walking and cycling links, etc. So all these have been thought through in this planning. Now, with regards to public transport, now I'm just going to zoom into this map a little bit so you can see it a bit better. Can you all see this? I'm just going to. Is that okay? Can you see this?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Look, so this is really a map showing the future for public transport in the Hamilton-Waikato metropolitan area. It's a map which demonstrates how we're going to connect some of the key growth areas as well as existing areas through good mass as well as frequent transit. Now, this is mode neutral. Mass does not mean high-speed trains. It could be trains, it could be buses. So, but it's really looking at mass transit, which is quite frequent. Passenger transport services like 15 minutes connecting key towns and suburbs in this area, as well as frequent transit, which could be buses, it could be trains as well. So if you look at this map, so this is the metro area here from Ngaruai here in the north down to Te Awamutu and Cambridge. So this economic corridor, the dark purple area here from Ngaruai, Horutu, CBD, Ruakura. This is the L shape, which is a key structuring element of the spatial plan. And this is really the areas where most of the growth is going to be located. So that this growth can be supported by good public transport. So Ngaruai here, certainly from a residential perspective, has been identified for major growth. And then Horutu is a significant commercial and industrial area with some residential components as well. Te Rapa, obviously, and we're going to have a major transport hub at Radukori when the train station is constructed. And then Franklin, which has a significant number of industries as well as businesses, the CBD, and obviously the Ruakura inland port. But I guess more importantly for the Waikato district is recognizing the connections of some of the key towns around the city to the city. And this is something which our elected members, Mayor Allen, also Councillor Beck, who's I think on the call, and also Councillor Smith and Councillor Maguire, they've all highlighted the importance of ensuring that these communities are connected to good public transport. So the very light grey ones, I'll just read for you in case you can't see: Tamahiri, Matangi, also Gordonton, Turkofai, and also recognizing the links to Raglan and Whatawhata, although Raglan does not fall in the metropolitan area, but recognizing that link. So And it also goes all the way up to Taupuri in the north, as well as to Huntly. Huntly will have a train station as well. So it's recognizing the interconnected nature of settlements in the Hamilton-Waikato metropolitan area, and seeing how best, if we're going to load more growth in Narawai here, more industries in Horatu and Te Rapa, as well as a mixture of residential and commercial development in the CBD, and more residential and commercial development in Ruakura, we need to make sure that that key corridor, that L-shaped corridor, is well supported by public transport, but also making sure that the suburbs and towns around that are also connected to each other and to the city core. So that's something, this map, our elected members have informed quite a bit, and I think we're quite pleased with the way this map has turned out, because it does highlight and feed into council's vision for a thriving, connected, livable community with regards to the Waikato district. So I'm just going to move on to the next slide, which is really acknowledging, and again, I'm going to zoom in a bit onto the map so you can see this a bit better, but this map is really acknowledging the key network corridors from a roading perspective that needs to be protected, and we're quite fortunate in this region, or the metropolitan area, that we have good roading networks. State Highway 1, State Highway 2, Waikato Expressway, obviously on the eastern flank of the city, which will be the Hamilton section will be opened hopefully end of 2021, and also recognizing the importance of the Southern Links connection just to the south of Peacock, including Tamahiri and the airport area, and that will bring unique opportunities to that area from both a residential as well as commercial and business perspective as well. So it's really recognizing the connections that exist and that needs to be enhanced as well as protected in terms of how the city grows over the next 100 years. So just a couple more slides, and then we'll have an opportunity to take some questions. So in terms of the future growth areas, so I mentioned earlier on that we need to make sure we grow this region or sub-region smartly. We need to make sure that we focus growth in areas that can be supported by good transport infrastructure, but also from a three waters perspective as well: water, wastewater, and stormwater. So the yellow blobs that you see is really the key focus area for growth, both from a residential and commercial perspective. I mentioned Narawaiha, but also clustered a group of Narawaiha is Hopu Hopu. So Waikato Tauniwi has aspirations for Hopu Hopu in terms of developing an innovation hub and also providing for tapakainga housing for its people in Hopu Hopu. Also Taupuri, which is just further up north, is also an important area which through Waikato 2070, we identified Taupuri for industrial development, especially providing for clean industries. So that's something which we're quite keen to promote and progress. We mentioned Rodokari, of course, Frankton CBD area, Ruakura, and then Cambridge, Hautapu down in the south, both from a residential and industrial perspective as well, and the airport area. So these yellow areas are really the key focus areas for growth and development. And also there's HT1, which we will be transferring to the city. It's the area just around Horsham Downs, which will be transferring to the city at an appropriate time into the future, and also R2 as well. So, and we can take some questions on this later on. And let me just quickly go to the next slide, and then we can just wrap up the presentation. As I mentioned earlier, in terms of the economic corridor, as you can see, this L-shaped corridor, which extends from Horatu in the north two to the CBD and to Ruakura. This really, you can see here in terms of job numbers, that has the highest concentration of jobs currently, and potentially more into the future as well. So that's going to be the key focus area in terms of this plan. But how do we connect our communities to these areas for employment is going to be important as well. And then just in terms of the implementation aspects of this, which I'm sure many of you would be interested in. So there are three key priority development areas which we've identified. One we call the Northern Hamilton Corridor, which includes Taupori, Hopu Hopu, Ngaruawahia, Horatu, Te Rapa, Rotokauri. Then there's the Central Corridor, which includes the CBD, Ruakura, Frankton and hospital area, and the Southern Corridor, which includes Peacocks, Tamahiri Airport, Cambridge, and Hautapu. So there are a lot of initiatives have been identified with regards to planning for growth in these areas. I'm not going to go through it in detail, but I'm happy to. I will make the presentation available to you after this, or we'll do that sometime tomorrow. So, but there are a number of projects that have been identified, which helps to facilitate the aspiration for this area. For just to give you a few examples, for Ngaruawahia, we need to think about how we're going to grow the town. If we want to cater for more people, say another, want to grow the town from the current 7,000 to doubling the growth, or even closer to 20,000, where are we going to concentrate that growth in Ngaruawahia? What is its relationship with Hopu Hopu and Taupori? The same with Horatu. If we want to expand the opportunities for industrial development there, what do we need to do, and how do we ensure that we incentivize industries to locate there? With regards to the Central Corridor, obviously Ruakura, the inland port there is key to this. So we're quite keen to progress the rezoning of land there to enable for more residential development with regards to in place of some of the industrial land that has already been allocated, as well as looking at the Southern Corridor, the Cambridge West Hautapu area in terms of infrastructure provision there, and also the airport area as well. Now, just from a waters perspective, a parallel piece of work that's currently happening relates to the provision of wastewater to an area which we refer to as Northern Hamilton-Waikato area, as well as Southern Hamilton-Waikato area. So, so two business cases will be developed, and we'll be looking how we're going to service our towns. In the north is looking how to service Tokawhai, also Ngaruawahia, Horatu, Taupori, from a centralized wastewater treatment plant, and possibly upgrading Puketi wastewater treatment plant. So that will provide us with an opportunity to see how we're going to service some of our communities. Now, Tokawhai is not identified in this plan as far as metropolitan scale growth is concerned. That's more of a local council, a district plan matter, which we are progressing. So, and the hearing for that takes place, I think, in next week, Councillor Smith, or 2 weeks' time. So, or will be early next year at the very latest. And then the Southern Corridor will be looking at the Peacock Airport area as well. Obviously, Southern Links plays a key role here in terms of how we connect the key communities over there. And so with regards to the Southern wastewater detailed business case, we will be factoring into that business case possibility of servicing areas like Matangi, Tawharai and Tawharai Pa, as well as the Tamahiri Village Hub. And Councillor Beck has been quite keen and to make sure that that business case includes consideration for servicing those areas, and that will be done. So at least we'll know that if we want to service these areas from a wastewater perspective, we'll know how much it's going to cost, and we'll see, you know, if there is an appetite for council and the communities to progress with that outcome when the business case is developed. So in terms of the next steps, so we're now in September, so the document is currently being refined. We're having a number of stakeholder engagement sessions, like the one we're having with you today. And there'll be a few more of these with other stakeholders, like you know, various like the property council, and there've been some already undertaken with the airport, as well as with the university, etc. So there'll be a few more of these, and then we will seek final approval of the plan from the Future Proof Implementation Committee towards the end of September, and then formally consult on this plan through the review of Future Proof. So communities like you will have an opportunity to make a submission to Future Proof. If there's anything you like or you don't like, you'll be able to make a submission, and that can be considered through a formal hearing process. Now, so that brings me to the end of the presentation, but I'm just going to offer, Councillor Smith, you've got your hands up?
Yeah, I have. If you've come to the end, and a question is, you've got mostly representatives from outside of those key areas I've identified on the yellow blobs, but just perhaps you could give a wider view, Vishal, insofar as the surrounding arc around Hamilton. We will, like Whara right through to Kowhai, round to Horsham Downs, through to Tamahiri, Matangi. We will get pressure because not everyone wants to live in residential. So we will get continued pressure for village expansion at Te Kowhai, if we're using that, if that gets put in, and other country living style, village style living all around the city. So I think those are the sort of questions that may come. Yeah. You've talked about all this, but what's the impact on us, or what do we get out of it? Maybe could you give any expansion on that? Just
absolutely. And Councillor Smith, before I answer that question, Councillor Beck, as our representative on the Future Proof Implementation Committee, would you want to add anything or make any comments?
In general terms, I think, and I'm sorry I missed your introduction. I was a couple of minutes late coming into the start of it, but certainly as a project, this H2A, it's really difficult to understate how important it is. You know, this is a very, very significant piece of work. With a large number of government agencies, councils, various authorities, various parties, you know, iwi, all sorts of people have contributed to what is a very, very significant piece of work that attempts to chart actually a very positive future for our wider region. You know, the H2A corridor, of course, it goes right to Auckland and to the south of us. But even this Hamilton Metro Spatial Plan within it, which is what's dearest to our hearts, I suppose, in terms of the city and immediately around it. Boy, there's some cracking opportunities here for the next period to come. And as we've seen, whilst the population numbers seem big, and possibly very far-fetched, the speed at which things happen, once you start to visualize them, once you get the infrastructure in place, market forces will probably drive them in a much shorter time frame than the ones contemplated here. So let's do so with guidance and with thought, rather than the laissez-faire market driven, which will lead to, I think, poorer outcomes for our community. So I'm not at all suggesting that it's not worth submitting because we've got everything right. Far from it. People should absolutely submit when that opportunity comes. But boy, there's a great picture being painted here, and a terrific amount of work that's gone into what's in front of us now. So that'll be my general comment, Vishal.
Thank you, Councillor Beck. So that's actually a good segue for me to answer your question, Councillor Smith. So yes, there will be significant growth pressures. Now, as we mentioned earlier, and as just pointed out by Councillor Beck, we can't go extreme market-driven laissez-faire. There needs to be a fine balance. We need to be able to also dictate, or not dictate, but work with the market to show them where, or work with developers to show where would like growth to happen, so that we can capitalize on things like mass transit and rapid as well as frequent transit, but also from an infrastructure provision perspective. Like council wants to grow Tokafai, as you know, and there's a district plan process underway to give effect to that growth, but being able to service that so we can actually consider providing more capacity for residential development in Tokafai, so developers can invest in an area like that. And the same will apply to Ngaruawahia, Hapu Hapu, and some of the other communities as well. So ultimately though, there's some communities, that there will be significant interest in terms of growth, but the key is that we want to make sure that the growth happens in the right locations. People want to be close to work, close to good public transport, so they don't spend too much time commuting, but also making sure that there's appropriate opportunities for recreation activities as well, in terms of walking and cycling, both active and passive recreation. So there's a fine balancing act that we need to play here. And it's not going to be easy because, as you know, the National Policy on Urban Development Capacity does compel councils to work with developers and make their aspirations possible where feasible. So we'll need to make sure we're able to play that fine balancing act.
I'd say also, if I may add to that, Vishal, Councillor Smith, you've been at the forefront of our development of New Vision in the last triennium, along with the work we've done with Blueprints last triennium and continuing now. And I think that the key thing for me is that growth will come whether we want it or not. Growth is relentless. We've seen Hamilton spill over its borders. Auckland continues to spill over the Bombays into our district. And I know you and many of our fellow councillors are actually very keen that as much as possible we attempt to build communities rather than end up with some hodgepodge private plan change after private plan change with no thought to those other work, live, play considerations that Vishal talked about. So I think this is aligning with what we were trying to do as a council in the face of growth.
Look, I totally agree with those sentiments from both you and Vishal. The issue for me is those on the not directly involved in this on the call don't know what we know, and the likes of Whara, say Marting and Horsham Downs, those people haven't seen and heard the discussions, and they're not on those little yellow blobs around the map. And so I think my question to you is, are we articulating, and I'm probably preempting some of your questions maybe, but so I'll get out of the way, but we need to articulate the story for what's happening in those gaps. And I'm just asking, have we done that enough?
Yeah. So Councillor Wilson, you want to answer? You've got a question?
Yeah, well, just looking at that yellow blob, when you're talking about the owl, it's sort of saying that people are going to live, and so it's almost going to be parallel to the owl, so that's almost where the growth's going to be. Coming right through Horsham Downs, Horachu, up through into, and then also on the other side, Te Kowhai through there, because that seems to be where town will grow, either side of the industrial section, the L. Sort of, there's actually no yellow where the HT1 is, which is surprising, because that's actually where Hamilton's been growing right through up until now, and all of a sudden we haven't actually said it's a growth node, which is to me surprising, because that's where town
Right.
is growing and it's still growing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So,
And then the other thing is, I just put in while I was talking, it would be nice to see a bus route put through Gordondon, just as
right.
yeah, because it's just on a curve. So yeah,
Sure.
I'll throw that in.
So, Councillor Willerton and Councillor Smith, so it does not mean that because there's no yellow blob, no growth is going to happen. What the yellow blobs are showing is that this is where most of the growth will happen. Obviously, there will be growth in HT1, that area which will be transferring into Hamilton in the future, as well as R2. There is what this map is showing is we're not going to be loading more growth into areas like Whata or even Tokowhai, other than what council has already provided for in Waikato 2070, the District Growth and Economic Development Strategy. So the District Growth and Economic Development Strategy will still run parallel to this. It'll make sure we are able to provide for growth and associated infrastructure in the towns around the Hamilton area. But we need to make sure that from a long-term perspective, in terms of a 500,000 population scenario, where most of this growth will happen, there'll still be people who want to have the lifestyle choice in terms of wanting to live in areas like Tokowhai, and we need to respect that. And there will be opportunities provided, which has been done through Waikato 2070, for that to be enabled. So yes, so we're not saying no to Tokowhai. We will still grow Tokowhai in accordance with district plan, and also possibly if it can be serviced, there'll be opportunities for increased capacity there, and also Whata in terms of what's already planned for there as well. But we're not going to be loading more growth in those areas because they're not on that mass transit network.
Okay, so that's fine. So I think as councillors, we'll step back and let the others ask questions. Thanks.
Okay. Can I ask
Sue.
a question?
Yes, Sue.
Please?
Yep, I can see you.
I can see that Morrinsville at the moment is sort of being not really thought about. And yet I read in the local paper that they're going to build 500 more houses there any minute now. There are a lot of people who already commute to Hamilton from Morrinsville.
Yeah.
So is that going to be a continuous series of cars, or are we going to?
No, so Sue, if you, I'm just going to go back to this map here. So Morrinsville is recognized. It's not in the Hamilton-Waikato metropolitan area per se, but it is recognized in terms of a mass transit connection. So whether this is going to be train or bus, high frequency bus service in the future, it is recognized as being intrinsically linked into the Hamilton area. Right. So absolutely. So we do recognize the importance of Morrinsville, both from a commercial as well as a residential perspective, and a farming, it has a large farming community. So that's going to be key. The link into Hamilton and is going to be key as well. So yeah, although Morrinsville is not in the Metropolitan Spatial Plan area, the links to it from a mass transit perspective is acknowledged.
Can I ask another question? You talk about the three waters. Now, is the farming land around all this area going to be left to cope with itself?
So I don't understand your question, Sue. When you say being left,
well, I mean, we have some areas have trickle feed water.
Yeah.
We all have septic tanks.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So, is this going to be built into it or not?
Yeah. So look, as far as so what we've started at the moment, as I mentioned previously, we've started a wastewater detailed business case process with regards to how we're going to service communities in the northern Hamilton-Waikato area, as well as in southern Hamilton-Waikato area. So that wastewater business case will look at servicing areas potentially like Matangi, Tamahiri Village Hub, as well as the airport area and Cambridge. So Cambridge is really driving this because Cambridge needs an urgent solution because its wastewater treatment plant is, is above capacity. So, and also the discharge consent conditions need to be addressed as well. So that's really driving it. But we've agreed that the scope of that work will factor in areas like Martingale and Tamahiri Village Hub, as well as the airport, and include the southern Hamilton area. Now, with regards to water, and I know that from a water perspective, the trickle feed system is also at capacity. So, so that's a piece of work which we've acknowledged that needs to be done. It has not been funded yet. And by the way, the wastewater study, we're still waiting for funding to come from government as well. But the water business case is something that we need to consider as councils, and I'm sure the elected members will be pushing for this as well, in terms of how do we service those areas, including the farming communities. So that's a piece of work which will be coming up for consideration over the next few months.
I noticed that Eureka doesn't even feature on your map.
No, look, we focus on the big community. We couldn't put every single community, and look, not every single area in Hamilton is in here as well, but we just focus on the key communities to make this map a bit more legible and readable. So
Yeah.
we just, yeah, but yeah. But
I think if I may comment, I think Sue, agree with everything that Vishal has said, but to directly address the sort of septic tank on rural farms, I think the answer is that even at 500,000 people within the area that's the area of study, it's still contemplated that there will be a large amounts of rural land on the the outskirts. In other words, the people will arrive in the nodes that are serviced because they are serviced. That infrastructure, the transport, the three waters, etc., will draw people naturally to those nodes. So for even at 500,000 people, it is likely we'll have large amount of rural land around us that will be collecting drinking water off the roof and having a septic tank in the garden.
Mm. Oh well, I'm up to date.
And Vishal, the study's really directed at a higher level at this stage. The granular level will come later, won't it?
Yeah, so the granular level come through the, I spoke about the implementation plans, Councillor Smith, so that's where we'll get some of the detail, but also the work that our council will be doing with regards to implementing Waikato 2070 as well, because that will be seen as supporting, that granular level, informing the Metro Plan. So that's going to be an important piece of work. So absolutely, and also consideration of whether we're going to be doing more local area blueprints. That's something we need to consider as well. So absolutely, implementation of Waikato 2070 and the local area blueprints will help provide some of the granular details. Are there any further questions or comments? Hi, Amanda. Sorry.
Hi.
You joined in when we started the presentation, so welcome.
I did, yeah. Sorry, I've been sitting here on mute, just watching and listening. I'm really pleased to see the transport plan that you showed before. I think that's fantastic. My question was just around the implementation of that, because it spans the different districts, the cities, the districts. What's the next layer down in that in terms of who delivers it, who's responsible? How are you working together to make that happen?
Sure. Amanda, can you introduce yourself to the rest of the members of the call?
Sure. Sorry, I'm Amanda Sharkey. I'm in Te Kowhai. So I'm just a local community member in Northwest Waikato.
An important community member, not just a community member.
I'm just a normal one.
No, you're a lot more than that, Amanda.
Yeah, look, implementation of the transport network is going to be key. Look, we're in the process of signing off a transport story to try and essentially bed in some of this thinking. But also there will be processes like the Regional Land Transport Plan, which is a transport planning document, which is led by the Regional Council, which we will be informing that. Now, the Regional Land Transport Plan really takes a 10-year view, so we'll need to take a short-term as well as a medium-term and longer-term view. There are already some projects are underway, like the startup service, a rail service between Hamilton and Papakura. So that's likely to start. It's supposed to would have started in November, but it's been pushed back to early next year, possibly February. So that in itself is a tangible demonstration that, you know, there's already some implementation happening in terms of that service. There's also a rapid rail business case, which has been developed by the Ministry of Transport. And that's looking at a high-speed solution connecting Hamilton to Auckland. So the next step, and that's just an indicative business case, the next step is a more detailed business case, which will take about maybe 2 years to complete. I'm happy, Amanda, to share that presentation with you. It just got released last week. So if you just get hold of me or Teresa, offline, we'll do that. But yeah, so there is a lot of work happening in the background to try and bed in some of this thinking. Now, the challenge with transport is that it can't be done, just like quickly. As demonstrated by the startup rail service, has been quite a journey, and there's been some challenges. COVID-19 has posed some significant challenges for public transport, so we just need to make sure that we just overcome this apprehension at the moment with regards to public transport in terms of how we're going to invest more into the future. The other point I'd like to make in terms of bus services, that's also quite a significant component of public transport thinking. We're quite keen to look at taking, and this is not going to happen over the next 3 or 4 years, but taking a medium to longer term perspective in terms of how we're going to connect those communities in the Waikato area, which I've showed on the map, into Hamilton, through good bus services as well, or enhanced bus services. So that's going to be something that we will need as council to think about through our long-term plan over the next few years. Councillors, do you want to add anything? Councillor Smith or Councillor Beck?
Well, if I
can Michelle, can Axel just explain a bit more, because he's on the committee that's pulling all this together, and you're there with him. So perhaps Axel, can you just give the role of your committee?
Sure, I'm happy to do that, and I think Rob would like to chip in with something afterwards too.
yeah, waiting long enough.
Here we go. Yes, I think it is. 1% usage of public transport currently, right? I mean, that's appalling. Not only from a climate perspective, but also just convenience of life and all the rest. I mean, just in so many ways, it's wrong, and we all understand the congestion that's now a factor of life in Auckland, and we'd very much like to see it not becoming a factor in the Hamilton metropolitan area. So I think that the work that's going in here is new, Amanda, and there's a new focus on that, right from better investment in cycleways and walking aspects, as well as the current government having said to NZTA that actually your brief is all users of the road, not just cars or trucks. That's been a big change. And in the mass transit area, we know the commitment to startup rail, but what I find much more applicable to communities such as yours and my one here in Tamaheri for that matter, is rethinking what buses look like. It doesn't need to be a 40-seater bus that trundles around empty. We can move much more to smaller, more on-demand vehicles, a sort of a Uber bus almost, that might be 6-seater, 10-seater, smaller vehicles that'll be much more responsive and much more flexible in terms of their routes through our community. So a lot of work to do. Progress is painfully slow, but at least it's underway now in a way that just hasn't been evident in the last decade.
Oh, that's good to know. Thank you.
Right, I just want to comment that the on the document itself, I think you're heading in the right direction, but I'm a little uneasy that you haven't secured the rail link between Cambridge and Hamilton in your diagram there. It's it was a very well used form of transport once upon a time, and a very good source of transport, but I see the line is straight to Cambridge, Hautapu, and but the line does go through Matangi, and it was an excellent service 30 or 40 years ago. So I just hope that can be reinstated one day, and I've had quite a few challenges trying to keep that line as it is, because a lot of people want to make it a cycleway and what have you. So it's been quite a challenge to, over my time as a councillor, to keep that line open. And it's still used to, the trains go 4 times a day to Hautapu to shift, I don't know, about 100 containers a day, or 50 to 100, I'm not 100% sure just how many. But it is active, still, but with trains, and just unfortunate that it was cut off at Hautapu. The bridge across the Victoria Road there for the Cambridge Expressway there has got a room to put the tracks under the bridge. That was a part of the deal. So I just hope that we look after that line and don't just kick it to touch, because it's it could be very easily lost, and it's been, as I said, 30 or 40 years ago, it was a tremendous transport link between Hamilton and Cambridge, and well used.
Yeah.
But I think overall you're heading in the right direction, and yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Maguire. Yeah, absolutely. Look, so this map does acknowledge, you know, that link between Cambridge and Hamilton and passing through Matangi. So absolutely. The reason why it's identified here is that we want to make sure that it's recognized as well as protected. And the key that, as you mentioned, it's not just for the movement of goods and services, but also for people.
Yeah.
So it needs to become a good passenger transit line between Cambridge, including Hautapu and Matangi, into the city as well. And a business case will need to be developed at the appropriate time, but at least now at this level, we're just recognizing that needs to happen.
Yeah, sorry, that's what I meant. It was a passenger and a goods shifting line.
Yeah, it's well recognised, Councillor Maguire, and I think the you know, if you can imagine you know, a southern wastewater solution that increases the capacity for places like Matangi, possibly even Hautapu to be serviced, but certainly Matangi in the first instance, that would unlock another opportunity for increased density of housing, more urbanisation, right on the footstep of Hamilton. And in that case, the rail, which, as you say, is still there and still active, becomes a very obvious means of transport. I should say also, in reference to the previous answer for you, Amanda, you know, for the first time ever, we are, or not for the first time ever, for the first time in many decades, you know, the river is being seriously talked about again as being an opportunity for transport. So there is a very wide view on what transport solutions could be, and I think that's great. So nothing's actually happening in terms of active services, but these things are being considered when in the past they weren't even being looked at in any degree of seriousness. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, visual.
Councillor Willerton.
Yeah, just again on what you said, Councillor Beck, it was interesting to have the Monga Māori actually mention and saying, why aren't we using the river? And that was for me quite heartening to see that it's coming, not just coming from us, it's coming from the Māori aspect, and meaning that they're open. You know, that's what she's saying. They're open to actually use that as a form of transport, which I actually find quite exciting to see. Paddle steamers or some sort of transport up and down the river would be a very nice, pleasant way to travel. So yeah, I think it's positive.
I guess if you look at just on that point, Councillor Willerton, the cities in Europe, the way they make use of the river, and yes, not all of them, quite a few of them are quite polluted, but I think in terms of, that something needs to be done about the levels of pollution, but in terms of using the river for economic activities, and if we get Waikato Tāniwi supportive of that, and local iwi supportive of that, then certainly that's something that we need to consider.
It's a bit of a catch-22 though, right, isn't it, with that sort of stuff?
Yep.
Amanda here again, sorry, with regards to that type of public transport, it's a balancing act between frequency and, people aren't going to use it if it's not frequent enough, and people are, it's with all the will in the world, it's going to be great to have, but unless you can afford to put it on at a frequent enough time that people were going to want to use it, then it's not going to be a goer. So the beauty of public transport is its timing and its consistency and its frequency. So yeah, it's a real balancing act, and I appreciate that we're in a bit of a rock and a hard place at that point where you don't have any of that confirmed, and it's hard to say one way or another whether it's going to work or not. So it's nice to say that we can all travel by river or by boat or by any other way, but at the end of the day, unless it's not going to be frequent enough, it's not going to be used.
And that's the growth model, isn't it, in overseas that we look to, that if that public transport makes a difference, public transport unlocks opportunities for people to have lead the lifestyles that they wish and still be close to work and other things that they access.
Yeah.
But you won't get that unless you've got concentration of where growth happens.
Yep.
So that's exactly the balance we're trying to strike.
Yeah.
Actually trying to be clear about where growth should happen, and for those nodes to be close to those infrastructural corridors, be it transport or other types of infrastructure, because otherwise the rock just keeps getting bigger and the harder place just keeps getting harder.
Yeah.
And we never get there.
Mm-hmm. Like comparing us to the, sorry, I was going to say comparing us to the international public transport models is probably a little bit different because they have a different concentration of people, that population, and the higher density of people, that they can have those public transport systems moving every 2 or 3 minutes, and we don't have that luxury, so we don't have that density of people. So I don't know, spreading out our public transport options across 6 different modes of transport may not necessarily be the right way. I don't know, I'm not an expert, but it just feels to me like we need to pick something that works and just run with it rather than spreading it out across multiple different methods of transport and hoping that one of them sticks, and not being able to offer any of them with any particular frequency that people can depend on.
It'd be interesting to see how the gentleman that's going to provide a service in the next few months up and down the river, how well.
Yeah, I think I heard that on the radio. I think it starts in a week or 2 this month. I think I heard that advertised down in Hamilton, hey, from Pakiti.
Yes.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to monitor.
If there were no further questions, Vishal, I was wondering if you could quickly plug the H2A session in a fortnight, maybe.
Yeah, so we have another session on the 17th of September, Teresa. 17th of September, if I recall correctly.
Thursday in a few weeks, yeah.
Yeah, at the same time.
Oh, Wednesday, actually.
Yeah, just to provide an overview of some of the key initiatives for the Hamilton to Auckland corridor plan. This is one of them, and we focus on the Metropolitan Spatial Plan quite a bit here, but we want to provide a bit of an update on some of the other projects. We spoke about rail, we spoke a bit about the Three Waters work, so we want to do that and include some of the communities in the north as well. So you're more than welcome to join the session, and Teresa will send out or has sent out the invitation. So, but this one is more focus on the Metro Spatial Plan because it relates more to your interest, but absolutely feel free to join the session on the 17th as well.
The invitation I got was for Wednesday the 16th, not Thursday.
Oh, that's probably right, Sue, so sorry, yeah.
Teresa, you're probably going to share this by video, so when will that be, or can you let us know? I know the likes of Amanda might put something up in our newsletter in
Definitely. I'll try to get it up tomorrow or early next week on our YouTube channel.
All right. Well, perhaps could you send the link out to us? So that would be good.
Yeah. So I'll send that
That'd
to you,
be great.
Teresa.
Thank you.
All right, look, this is not the end of the conversation, and obviously it's an ongoing, the plan is just a draft, and there'll be an opportunity for submissions, as I mentioned, next year through the review of Future Proof. So, you know, just absolutely keep the conversation going, keep the ideas coming, your comments coming, and I hope you will take part in the more formal consultation process next year as well. So we really need the input from our communities to help inform this. So thank you very much. Some great questions, some great comments. So yeah, we look forward to ongoing engagement with you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
Have a good evening. Thanks, everybody.
See ya.
Bye.